Hi, friends. It's Mrs. Wriedt back for you today with another exciting book from the Figge Art Museum's Big Picture Outreach collection. And I'm really excited today to share with you a story about an artist whose name is Yayoi Kusama. And of course, I'd like to explain to you why we choose these books and why we've highlighted our artist today, Yayoi Kusama. Yayoi Kusama was actually born a long, long time ago, but she is still living today. She was born way back in the year 1929, and she grew up in a country that we call Japan. So Yayoi Kusama uses a lot of what she remembers from being a little girl in Japan, and she puts that into her artwork. So a lot of the things that she remembers have to do with different kinds of shapes and lines and patterns. And really for her, she grew up during a time when she was expected to do things in a certain way. And, when she was getting a little older, she decided sometimes she needed to break those rules. So we're gonna read about how she created her artwork and how she celebrates art today. And I hope you enjoy my book. We'll get started. Yayoi Kusama, From Here to Infinity. And it's actually written by Sarah Suzuki and illustrated by Ellen Weinstein. So here we go. And you might actually have a guess that Yayoi Kusama was very inspired by beautiful, colorful dots. Look at that beautiful picture. So you can tell she lived in Japan just by this beautiful palace here. Yayoi Kusama was born in the country of Japan on the island of Honshu in a town called Matsumoto City. An old palace made of wood and stone overlooked a moat where swans swam. The streets were lined with little shops, and snow-cropped mountains rose in the distance, swallowing up the sun as it went down in the evening. Oh, it looks like a beautiful place to live. Look at these little cherry blossoms, too. It's springtime, right? Wow, she grew up in a colorful place. Yayoi's family owned nurseries where all kinds of flowers and vegetables grew, and workers tended the plants as they matured from seeds to sprouts to stalks. But Yayoi yearned for a different life, far from the countryside. She dreamed about what lay beyond the mountains in places far from Matsumoto City. She longed to leave home and see the world. And sometimes, oh heck, I can remember being young and feeling like there were places in the world I had to visit, right? Maybe some of you are thinking the same things. Yayoi's mother wanted her to stay home and learn old-fashioned manners, how to dress elegantly, walk demurely, and eat politely and find a proper husband, because this is really part of the Japanese tradition during that time. But Yayoi wanted to be an artist. Every day she went outside with ink and brushes and paper. She drew things she saw and things that she imagined. She looked closely at the pebbles that lined the riverbeds and the leaves and stalks of plants, and she drew them as chains of tiny cells that looked like dots. Do you see her there with her brushes? And these are the stones of the riverbed that to her look just like dots. When she was older and studying in art school, her teachers disapproved of her work, and they demanded that Yayoi paint in the traditional, precise Japanese style. She wanted to go where she could live without these rules. When she was 28 years old, she packed up her silk kimonos and thousands of drawings and stuffed dollar bills into the toes of her shoes. Look at, even her dollar bills have dots. It was her very first airplane trip. There were only 4 other passengers, and the weather was stormy with rain and lightning, and the airplane waddled and dipped as it flew all the way to America. That would be kind of scary, right? Being on that plane during a storm all the way from Japan. So when she landed, she found herself in this big, huge city. Do you see her standing up there on top of this big, tall building? This is New York City. In New York City, Yayoi went to the top of the Empire State Building, the tallest building in a city full of tall buildings. And when she looked down, she saw buses and cars and yellow taxis zooming up and down the avenues, and bankers and teachers and artists rushing to work. From up on the 86th floor, they all looked like, yep, you guessed it, they looked like dots. She felt very far from quiet Matsumoto City and her mother's rules. Here, it seemed like anything was possible. It is almost like she's on top of the world, way up there on the 86th floor, right? So this is Yayoi in her apartment in New York City, where she created all of her artworks when she was just getting started. Yayoi set about turning her drawings of dots into paintings. The dollar bills that she had brought to America quickly ran out, and she spent what little money she had left on paints and canvases. She worked day and night. She painted when she was cold. She painted when she was hungry. And she painted when she was lonely. And she turned her dots into sculptures too, into soft stuffed tubes that covered sofas and chairs and boats. Look at that furry, stretched dot chair, right? When she was devoted to her dots. For her, they were a way of thinking about the world among the stars, as one dot among millions of others. They were a way of thinking about infinity. So you might be wondering, what does infinity mean, right? Infinity is really how we can think of infinity kind of like something that never ends, right? It just keeps going and going and going, kind of like the stars in the sky, right? Yeah, you also like to visit museums. Sometimes when she grew frustrated, she visited the Museum of Modern Art. Can you see it right there? She gazed at paintings by other artists, and she thought about why and how they were made. She looked at pictures of dancing girls and swirling night skies, trying to solve them as if they were puzzles, asking herself, why did these artists create these artworks? And maybe some of these artworks even inspired what she was going to paint next, right? Well, here we are in the streets of New York City, a gallery that has her paintings. Her paintings seemed so different than those that she had seen at the museum. When she at last was ready to show her work in public, she invited all of her friends she had made in New York. When she arrived at the gallery, a crowd was spilling out onto the sidewalks. Her friends lifted her into the air, shouting, "Yayoi, you have finally made it!" Word about her artwork spread quickly. Her friends told their friends, newspapers wrote about her work, and reporters clamored to interview her about her dots. Now she began to show them in other cities all over the United States and all over Europe. So all over the world, really, everybody. Look at this. More dots, more dots. And there's Yayoi. Her dots were covering the world. They appeared in Venice in thousands of dot-shaped mirrors scattered over a big green lawn, and even on a pumpkin on a pier. That's true, a huge pumpkin covered in her dots. On dresses and t-shirts, on people walking down the street, and in mirrored rooms where glowing dots were reflected and reflected again, an infinity of dots. They're almost like they're everywhere, right? Look at her room here where she has dots reflected in the mirrors. So they seem to go on forever and ever and ever. Having visited many countries all over the world, Yayoi returned to Japan. The country had changed since she had left, with many different artists challenging the old traditional style, as Yayoi had been doing all along. Look at even her dog. Do you think her dog for real had dots on it? I don't know. She still lives in Japan, and she continues to paint her dots every single day. Well, now this reminds me of the riverbed from when she was a little girl. So she uses those memories of being little in her artwork that we see that she creates every day. Here are some of her paintings that we can see in museums. You see how she uses her dots? And this is that stretched dot chair that we talked about. This one even has a dot inside of a dot inside of dots. This one here is a picture of her infinity room. So it's got mirrors reflecting all of her dots. And then this one of my favorite, it looks like a gumball explosion kind of, doesn't it? It's got dots all over the chairs and the furniture and the floors and the ceilings in all different colors. I bet you guys could do something like this, right? Could you create a picture using dots? Well, that's going to be our art challenge that if you stick around, you're going to get to do with me. We're going to paint, or actually we're going to draw or paint if you want to, dots that are inspired by Yayoi Kusama.
Hi friends, it's Mrs. Wriedt back with you so that you can help me create an artwork inspired by our artist that we read about today, Yayoi Kusama. So we learned in her book that she was very interested, really throughout her whole entire lifetime, in creating art in a new and different way than her traditions that she was brought up with when she lived in Japan. And we learned that one of the things that she really loves is how things that she sees in her everyday life often turn into the form of dots. So what I'd like us to do today to begin is to prepare a few papers. You see I've got maybe five, well I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 papers here that I have prepared ahead of time. And you'll see that I used a material that we know as paint, right? So I'm using some paint today to create different dots on my papers. Now you can use markers, you can use crayons. It doesn't really matter what material you're using. I know sometimes we like to play with paint. And all I really do is just create dots using my thumb. So I'm making thumbprints all over my papers. Once I have a few papers prepared, this gives me a chance to select the one that I think is kind of the most interesting first, right? And I can go back and make lots of different pictures, but after looking at these, I'm going to just pick one. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and choose my dot paper, right? So here I have a paper with just 3 blue dots. And I have to start thinking about how Yayoi Kusama would not only see things in the form of dots, but oftentimes she would imagine what something could become in the form of dots. So I might turn my paper a few different directions before I start to see some kind of picture taking place in the form of dots. Maybe it goes this way. Nope, I kind of like it this way. Okay, so what I want to do first is I'm going to take my pencil like you've seen me do before, and I'm going to draw the details that I see in these dots to create a picture. Okay, now that I have my picture drawn in my pencil, I can go back and make adjustments if I want to, which is simply with my eraser. But now it's important for me to fill it in with color. And again, I can use my markers, I can use crayons. If I want to keep working with my paint and paintbrush, I can do that too. But it's really important as an artist that I fill in with my whole page and with color. Okay, so you can see, boy, these were my first 3 dots that I had on my paper, and the more time I spent looking, I started to see a mama bird and her 2 baby birds, and I had to draw my details with a nest and maybe some grass down below. You'll notice I also used a nice variety of materials. I used my pencil to do the details, and then I incorporated markers and crayons. So we used 3 different materials today. So have some fun finding things around your own house, different materials you can use to create your own Yayoi Kusama inspired dot piece. Thanks for watching.